What I really like, I don't know if I've told you about this game I like to play, where I like to try and come up with geometries of ideas, like physical like shapes.
One, two, three, four.
I mean, a very simple one that I think is really beautiful is the shape of respiration. It looks like a lung. Like you can see, like a tree looks the same as like an actual lung in your body, and like that's the shape of breath. And like flight has a certain shape, like, you know. Um, but I think it's really interesting that the shape of the DNA, that helix structure, is very much a shape of material life. And it's interesting that it's a spiral because you can be at the same point at a different perspective, at a different perspective, at a different perspective. And I think that that's like, that kind of says it all in a way, where it's like, oh yeah, I thought I learned this. Nope, but didn't see it from that angle. Okay, we're back here. I thought I healed this. I thought this wasn't a trigger for me anymore. Like whatever. And I don't know. I think that that shape is really powerful because in my experience, we never move through something and then it's just never there again. We just keep revisiting it from different heights. And I just love that. And it's like something I remind myself when I'm like, fuck, we're back here. And I'm like, oh, no. Okay, I'm just at a different, okay, where's my location now? I haven't been at this location before looking at that thing that I do or whatever it is. But
So for folks who haven't met us and just got plopped into a conversation about really heady meta things, who are you?
hey, what's up? I'm Sara. I'm the CEO and founder of Loop and Tie, and someone who just likes to climb the helix, look at things from a lot of different perspectives, and yeah, love the feeling of being like, oh wow, I definitely thought that was true at one point in time, and now I definitely think it's not anymore. So yeah, that's me.
That's you. I'm MK. I'm the CMO of Loop and Tie. And I too like to think about the complexities and ironies of life, not just from the perspective of our life's journey and wherever we're headed and what we're doing, but also love to think about the juxtaposition of many of the life lessons that we learn and its role in business. And so that's why we're all here, and you're invited to join us on this adventure in exploration around what systems exist and what we like and what we want to carry forward and what systems we think no longer serve us. And that's what we're here to talk about. So Sara, I know you're super passionate about this practice, this principle that you've coined. You've coined the name of this practice and this principle, invitational commerce, which is just like the concept itself is like, yeah, totally get it. I love it. And then you like get into the concept and you're like, oh wait, hold up. I may not get it. Can you very quickly just give an overview of invitational commerce for somebody who's like never heard of it, not in the matrix, not like understanding or is like in the matrix and doesn't know that they're in the matrix, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, before even getting into what it is, I think one of the things that is really fascinating to me about the concept overall is how much it keeps evolving for me personally. So the idea of invitational commerce is really a response to wanting to pursue something that is opposite from the way that I see current transactional principles and current commercial systems being run, in this way that just feels really degenerative, depleting, just like burnout feeling around a lot of the way that I feel when I interact with business, when I interact with even, buying things generally, just sort of that exhaustion. And so I'd say overall, it's a wondering of what's the opposite of what I've been experiencing and what I've been feeling, and how do I do whatever I'm doing differently, as sort of a general wondering. And then to bring that down into something more specific, it's this idea that commerce doesn't have to be this thing based off of trade that's just very cold and about just, when we talk about trade, the idea of just giving and getting in a way that is all about the deal, all about the product, all about the transaction. It's kind of what would happen if we held the energy differently around what we were doing when we were either buying or selling something, and kind of a curiosity about what happens when you're doing the same action, but just from a different awareness, from a different perspective. And to me, the idea of being invitational is an opposite from what we're currently doing, because it's this openness versus this directive. And when, in my own sort of exploration of what do I find so depleting about the current commercial constructs, I find that it's really this idea that this is the way it is. It's a directive. Are you in or you out? And to me, the opposite of a directive is an invitation. And I like this idea of approaching commerce with this more wondering mindset. I think I'm aware that also still sounds pretty vague. So I'm like, okay, how do we bring this down into something even more specific? And to me, it's really about using the intelligence of our nervous system to guide the way that we interact, and to show up in buying or selling situations. If we're going to use, probably the atomic unit of a commercial system, it's buying and selling, showing up in those moments in a way that is really guided by your nervous system, guided by the intelligence that's kind of beyond the logical mind, and seeing what happens when we participate in that way. And so from the outside, the experience could look no different. You could still be going to the store and buying or selling something, but if you're going to a store based off of, the guidance that you have from what feels like the most expansive place to sell your goods, perhaps, what feels like the most expansive price to charge, versus that kind of more, I would say, directed energy that's like can feel almost like a moratorium. You have to do it this way or else. So that's I love a run-on sentence. So I don't even know if that's a run-on sentence. That's more of that's a vignette meandering classic.
Well, the beauty of this time in this space together and with folks who are listening is that we get to unpack all of that and explore it, and also explore it in real time too, because this is an ongoing, omnipresent journey of understanding exactly that one guiding principle that you started this off with, which was that this is all about questioning and challenging the norms of how you've navigated commercial systems and commercial relationships and commercial practices, not necessarily just to be combative and to just like stick it to the man, but it's also so that you can understand what practices in your commercial, navigation are actually beneficial to you and to the collective, right? Because I think one of the things I find really intriguing about this concept is that, like, yes, in the atomic unit of just buying and selling, there is a transaction, right? You can't deny that. You can't ignore that. But there's a way to approach the transaction such that it's not just that very finite, myopic moment within the transaction. There is a way to approach the totality of all of the things that are interconnected and interwoven, where you can have a better, more uplifting, more net positive outcome of that atomic unit of buying and selling.
It makes me think of one of my favorite examples to really illustrate this point is you can go to the gym every day because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. And you could go to the gym every day because you feel really great when you move. You have two legs, you want to move them. You have two arms, you want to move them, whatever. And it's a totally different experience if that's your motivation system, is like, oh my gosh, I have the ability to support my body and I love it when I can move without pain. Versus like, oh, this other thing I've got to take care of, right? And it that kind of intentionality colors everything. And so I think increasingly we've set a norm that business sucks. We just gotta sort of deal with it. Capitalism sucks. The way that we extract resources sucks, but it's the price we have to pay. And I don't agree. I mostly don't agree because I don't like how I feel when that's my mentality as I'm making my decisions and moving through the day. And when I talk about my nervous system, it's like so much of my life force, my vitality kind of rebels against that. It's like, I don't want to do things that suck. I don't want to do things that make me feel bad about myself just because everyone else is doing them. And I'm pretty sure no one else does too, but we're all just following this lead. And what excites me about introducing this concept is what ideas it might spark from just that idea of, wait, do we have to do it that way? Or why do I do this? And, it's just really holding that energy of a question and something that's important to me as, I personally am on my own exploration of considering what other commercial interactions might be possible and what is beyond our current norm, is not coming in with a directive that's like, okay, this way sucks, here's a better way, because it's the exact same. That's right. It's the same underlying energy of that, right? Of directive. And so I think one of the things that makes this harder to encapsulate and needs to be leaned into is it's not a prescribed norm, it's a question. And that can lead us in so many different areas. And, for me, a question I often ask myself is like, okay, what does success look like? Because I like to know what I'm orienting around. It's, the idea of success, I think, is a really beautiful organizing principle and can become an overlord if we hold it too strongly. It's like, this or else. But for me, success looks like having a concept that allows me to see places that I've had beliefs that are actually at odds with the way I want to be living. And it looks like asking questions that are, I would say either pointed enough or novel enough, that's the word I want, to get someone else to be like, oh, whoa, here's another question and another question, and creating that as the momentum and not necessarily a bunch of solutions, but just I wonder who we are if we're all asking better questions.
I love that. So I guess in other words, if you're invited in this space and you want to get value out of this space, one of the most important things you have to bring is curiosity and an openness to what presents itself in conversations that are, if you've lasted this long, 15 minutes, that are a lot more intangible, right? Like it takes a certain belief system of openness, of curiosity, of what is possible in order to get value out of the space.
Absolutely. And I think, I always mess up sayings. What is it? A bone I have to pick, or something. I'm picking at something and it's hard, and that's let's just pretend I know the phrase. But a challenge I have. There we go. Sometimes we can call it broadly, a critique of business, critique of system, is that the format we often use is, this system is wrong, this system is broken, here is a new system, here is a better system. And there's two things I find challenged with that. First, this construct of wrong and right, that's so relative. And I prefer to look at preference or alignment. Maybe this is wrong, is not as effective for me as, okay, an intention I have in my life is to continually feel more empowerment and joy, and I want and be enlivening the systems that I'm in and be actively contributing and receiving versus just taking, right? And I would love to live in a world where we're able to each have that kind of experience of like continual enlivening of each other. That sort of ecstatic energy. And so it's not what that one's wrong or right. It's more of a, hey, this is what I prefer, and I want to make sure that my decisions are in alignment with my preference as one thing. And then the second is I have a real challenge with prescribing systems. I think systems are representative of their constituents, and they're always a lagging indicator. And so I think one of the most powerful things that we can do if we want to change the systems that we are, experiencing and living in, is to really have the bravery to take a look at ourselves and our own decisions, and how our decisions in our own internal world are perhaps out of alignment with whatever the intention is that we're not seeing displayed in the external world. And I think about this a lot with like the concept of zero sum games. And, I like to look at, okay, where within myself does the concept of zero sum live, for example? Because being zero sum is not in alignment with the intention I have for when I think of a goal, or what success looks like kind of lifestyle. It's to me, that doesn't represent a regenerative growth cycle of enliven, and you see that a lot in political systems, especially in like warring areas. It's us or them, and which is really, really challenging for me to process. And in my own exploration of like, okay, is that true? Like, is that a truth that like I just have to get comfortable with? Something that's really helpful for me is to be like, okay, where in my internal world does that live? That it's, us or them kind of mentality, and what lies beyond that. And I don't have any clear answers yet, but I have like noticed for myself places where I've sort of held that as something that is absolutely true, and it hasn't been. And to me, that is like a little bit of a thread that you can pull, that if you can find that inner harmony, then like I wonder what happens when you've got 10 people that do that, 20 people that do that, what happens, like how does that affect the broader system? So to tie that all together, I would say something that I think is important to enter into this your invited conversation with is the concept that we're not about introducing a systems trade, that this system is better than the previous. It's more about, okay, let's just talk about and maybe get to some agreement on the how we got here, and ask really good questions that help us realize how we're creating these systems, and maybe make some changes on individual levels. And I think it's really powerful what can happen when just one or two people change their mind, and and the magnitude of when that grows.
I love that. Well, and I think you're right. Like, we're not trying to propose a system that's better than anything, because I actually think fundamentally that's in direct conflict with this principle of being invitational. And the beauty of what this is, we use the metaphor a lot about talking about hosting a party, right? Like, you're hosting a party, and maybe it's more of a potluck, right, where everybody's contributing something to the nourishment of the community that's assembling. And for us to say, no, this is the party and this is how you bring, like, you immediately stifle what is possible when we all start to shift a frame of reference and reorient ourselves around that, to your point earlier, that goal that we have in mind. And what's interesting, I think, about this concept is there's also no clear and omnipresent goal that is very defined yet, right? Because we're still doing a lot of unlearning of systems, with the awareness now that we're recognizing that many of these systems actually don't work for us. Zero sum games, for example, is a great representation of this. Like, literally someone wins and someone loses. And if we think about that finite mindset, we're going to continue to perpetuate the same behaviors over and over and over again. So what if everything is a tie? What does that neutralize in the way that we practice everything? And how does taking those practices ultimately end up helping the collective rise to a new level of awareness, rise to a new level of life practices? And I'll use that all encompassing, but like, in theory, the way you conduct yourself in life is the way you conduct yourself in business. They aren't mutually exclusive. And with that collective frame of reference, we can start to make the things that we see around us feel more enriching, feel more like that positive state of mind of going to the gym rather than having to go to the gym. What I think is really helpful for folks who are just learning this for the first time and going through this is thinking about what jumped to my mind anyway as you were talking was thinking about our frame of reference as a prism, right? Like we are viewing everything in this world with a very specific prism put in front of that, or maybe a lens is a way to put it as well too. And you, whether or not you're aware of it, you're viewing the world with a specific set of lenses on. And the first step in understanding and trying to embrace invitational practices is to start playing around with the prism, start playing around with the lenses so that you can change your frame of reference through which you're viewing the world, right? The perfect metaphor of going to the gym. Do you have to go to the gym because you have to be there and you have to do that? Or is it I get to go to the gym, right? Like I'm excited to go to the gym and I'm excited for what I can create in this practice of, physical well-being. And then once you start to bring more awareness to how you're approaching the way you see the world and what you're doing with the world, therein gives you that exciting opportunity to try on a different lens. Just like, what if I just viewed the world in a different way? Or what if I didn't actually view the world? I just observed and just like let no judgment creep into what's happening here. And I think what I'm hearing you say, like, that's the first place to start if you want to start to become part of an invitational practitioner, I guess I would say.
Well, I'd say, I mean, so first of all, yes. And I think to distill that down even further, to me, it's really about starting to get attuned with and partnering with your nervous system. Because for me, when I talk about that, what I'm talking about is the sense, at a very basic level, there's people I get on the phone with, and it is so easy to talk ideas. It is, things just flow. I'm having such a great time. I'm enjoying my job. And there's times where I'm trying to get a deal done and it's just not working. And I just keep doubling down and it's just like constrict. And I'm really curious about what happens when you just, not even taking action, but just start to notice how your body responds in different commercial environments and different commercial situations. And I use the word commercial to really just capture all of the different styles of work-related, job-related, perhaps even money earning or money spending moments, and starting to get attuned with what is the information system that your body is communicating that you may or may not be listening to. Because for me, I notice that I'm often overriding what a signal is that my body's giving me. To me, starting to be more invitational is about taking actions that are driven from a different consideration. So like, for example, if I have a goal, call it like, we've got a big sales goal we've got to hit this month. It's really, really important. And so as I'm considering how I spend my time, I could say, okay, I am only going to spend all my time going out to specific networking events where I know my customers are going to be. I'm only going to go to conferences. I'm not going to do any leisure travel. I am going to dial this in. I'm going to meet as many people as possible. It's a numbers game. I'm going to crush my goal. Makes sense, right? Super logical. If the idea for me of going to maybe it's an HR tech conference feels just like, okay, I got to do this. I don't want to do it. It feels exhausting. I don't feel like networking, but I'm going to do it anyways. That would be an example of a nervous system override. My body's saying no, but I'm like, got to do it. Got to hit my goals. Maybe my body is saying, hey, like your friend invited you to this party. It's the same weekend, so you can't go because you're going to go to the HR thing. But your body's like, oh man, that would be so fun if I got to do that. An example of listening to your nervous system would be going and happening to meet somebody who's the head of HR for a huge prospect, right? That you could have never planned. And I have a sense that there's so much non-logical knowledge that is trying to make its way to us that we are totally cutting off because we are unwilling to see anything outside of that no pain, no gain, very zero sum. I'm going to do this, or else I'm not going to hit my goals. There's no other way. And it keeps us locked in that very degenerative cycle. And so, to me, the first step to leaning into being invitational as you approach any business endeavor is to start to tune in to what your body's telling you and starting to learn that language, much in the same way that we've learned how to speak to a client, how to, it truly is its own language. And I think that the more that we start to trust that, there is this emergence of knowledge and this sort of emergent blueprint that starts to present itself that's different for each of us. And it's not 100% of the time that going to the party is going to be a better idea. Sometimes you never know, but I think it's becoming the person that's willing to listen to that knowledge. And those are the people that, I'm sure you've met where you're like, man, they just always land on their feet. Things are just always working out for them. What are they doing? And I really think it's because they're in this expanded state where they're willing to, just follow the flow, and they sit next to, someone on a plane that ends up being their biggest client. And there's just so much power in that. And kind of comes back to this place that, hey, maybe it all doesn't have to suck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly why we're creating this space, is to say it doesn't have to suck, right? And as soon as you start,
should we change the podcast to be called that?
It doesn't have to suck.
Tune in, learn out how to. Yeah. You heard it here first.
That perfectly summarizes why we're creating this space and why you all are invited to join us in this space. It's because we are acutely aware that so many things are sucking right now. We don't have the exact answers to tell you how to make it unsuck, but we can give you some guiding practices, and we'll probably invite some friends in here to this space to share their take on how to make some of these things unsuck.
Yeah.
So if you're, if you're open to trying something new, if you're curious, if you are recognizing that the way that you have been navigating your job, your relationships, your physical well-being, your mental well-being, and you still want to crush your job, this is the space for you. You're invited. And we're going to talk about very heady meta things. We're going to talk about very practical, pragmatic things for you to deploy immediately as soon as you stop listening, stop watching, however you're consuming this media. And we're excited for the journey that lies ahead. This is just surface level. We're 30 minutes in. We've talked about all different kinds of things here. There's so much more to come. So Sara, if folks want to get caught up, what is a good place on, what should they be reading? Where should they be starting in order to understand and orient themselves a little bit more to this concept of invitational commerce?
Sure. So first of all, before I forget it, I want to just note one other thing on just the potential to change. I think it's important to acknowledge the bravery and the discomfort that I think can happen from just kind of getting out of that normed mindset we have that is very no pain, no gain. And something I think is really powerful that I'm hopeful we spur through our podcast is a sense of possibility of just a different way of being. And I think that we often get caught in, I'll once again use the idea of, okay, well, if I want to hit my goals, I've got to do all of these things that might feel really depleting, but they're the thing to do. Because there is a gravity to that. There's a momentum to it. And it's what our collective conscious kind of believes, does believe. And so I really see it as a very strong visual of there's truly a gravity to it where there is something that pulls you towards that when you see everyone else doing a certain thing. If you are not choosing to go to the networking event that depletes you, there's a certain, oh God, I hope I'm not wrong in this, right? And I think that especially at the beginning of when you're trying on a new way of making decisions and motivations, it's a free fall moment because it's not proven. You don't necessarily trust it yet. You just know whatever you're doing is not working. And often I think that's why burnout, it can be such a gift because it's a rock bottom moment where you're like, okay, whatever I'm doing isn't working. And so I'm at least going to have to try something else because I know what lies over here. And we don't have to get to that point of max burnout, but it's often where a lot of us end up going. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge the discomfort that can happen from doing anything, especially in the work world, and especially when it's tied to money. And we all need money to buy food and to buy, our houses and live our lives. And so it can feel really, really scary to take any risks at all. And I'm really curious about what happens when we can build a community around norming not doing what is that sort of no pain, no gain status quo. So I hope that we get to be a part of, kicking off just being templates of something that's different, and that, there's listeners that are activated by that. And I'm curious about what point of difference they might be in their own circles and their own communities. And do what they need to recharge, because it's really hard to continue to be different from everything that's surrounding you and not kind of feel that pull into that. So all of that to say, good luck out there. You're doing great work.
You're doing great.
Doing great. This is hard. And then your resources question. So we will be publishing more about the concept of invitational commerce on the Substack, invitationalcommerce.substack.com. I will also put up a resources page to link to some of the places that I've been inspired by just different ways of thinking. One that I'll just cite off the bat is the Capital Institute. John Fullerton has created, and along with many others, a really beautiful resource that explores different means of capital structures, really focuses on regenerative economic principles, regenerative financing, and pulls in wisdom from so many different camps, and it's a really beautiful resource. So we'll certainly link to that. And I generally find a lot of inspiration outside of the business world and more in just philosophy and spirituality, because it gets down to that core nugget of who am I, and like how do I want to behave, and then what system results from that. So look forward to a lot of links.
We love links. We love learning. We also love self-aware leaders as well too. So I'm really excited to get to embark on this journey as two very self-aware individuals who just want to help others with what we've learned. And like I said, we'll probably bring in experts to talk about the concepts that we're talking about, because we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that we're not experts in any one area that we'll be talking about too. So surrounding ourselves with folks who are smarter in some areas than us and in others, to just get to learn asynchronously together. You mentioned burnout in that last segment there, and I think that's probably where we're going to go next. So if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling run down, if you're feeling like there's got to be a better way, like the infomercials led you to believe there are, and there is, by the way, join us on our next episode where we talk about burnout and its role in helping to perpetuate the cycles that don't serve us, the cycles that are extractive from us, when we try to look more closely at how to build cycles that are regenerative and helpful and hopeful for what's possible. I think that wraps our first.
We did it.
Episode.
Yeah.
You're invited to not listen anymore, because this is the end of the episode.
Yep, that's good. It's a great closer. You were invited, and now you're invited to stop.
And now you're invited, to go do what you need to do. Pick up the kids, take a walk, read a book, read some of Sarah's thought leadership, things like that.
Perfect.
All right, until next time.